get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say
This is so awesome.
Are an open culture that
it's actually
what is that process that a developer, or let's say
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed.
Welcome to another episode of In the Clouds. I am your host, Stu Miniman. It is September 21st, 2023. Do you remember? Okay, that's an old joke for people that might know some classic rock out there. But we're gearing up for Kubecon, Cloud Native Con 2023 in Chi-Town, Chicago. I actually will not be going to that one in person. I've been to a lot of the KubeCons, but joining me to co-host for second time on this program, Mike Foster will be going to Chicago. He was on with me last year when we had the preview of the Detroit show. Mike, thank you so much for joining me again. I know you're gearing up and excited to go, mingle with the big community.
Yes, second one in a row. Thanks for having me on. I'm extremely excited to interrogate our guest, who's obviously has his hands in everything CNCF. So it's gonna be a fun 45 minutes to an hour, and I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Yeah, and happy to welcome to the program. First time guest on here, and Mike had met him, but first time I've met Taylor Dolezal, who is the head of ecosystems with the CNCF. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really excited to get into some discussion today. And I heard that, the future is cloudy. So Outlook is cloudy.
Yeah. Seems like this cloud thing will stick around for a while, even though, come on, Taylor, we're already a minute or so in. We need to say AI, because AI is all of the things and everything. So I'm super excited. You're going to tell us KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. Are you rebranding or just changing the entire keynotes and all of the tracks to be ChatGPT compatible? So
it's funny. There was a whole bunch of submissions that came in with, and you could very much tell ChatGPT. And so, yeah, it creates whole new kinds of discussions as it comes to CFP approvals and reviews and everything on that front. But it's people are buying vowels. They have a budget.
Oh my
A
God.
and
I've been meeting. What I'm really excited. Head of ecosystems means you're in charge of those end users in the community. So you've been from the end user world. You were an SRE back in the day. You've been on the vendor side also, and you've been having your own open source journey that led you to the CNCF. But yeah, I tell you, I meet with a lot of customers, and AI absolutely is a top talking point. I've already started to talk to some customers that were like, yeah, we took, ChatGPT 3.5, we did install, we're training it on it, and starting to have output on it. We're all trying to figure out, how to use it. But boy, all the people, I do feel sorry for the people that if they had to get submissions that were coming in and be like, hey, I don't think a person wrote this, or, we talk about some of the AIs have hallucinations when they're creating things. So it's always, we usually joke out in the cloud world in general, or in the cloud native ecosystem, we can sometimes just make up some projects and people won't know. We might be talking about something called Open Tofu on this call, which if you haven't watched the news in the last 24 hours, you'd be like, no. Taylor's just making puns and jokes. This is absolutely not reality. But Taylor, could you just give us a little bit of your journey to the CNCF?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a book that's really good, and I try to sell everybody on this one. I don't have an affiliate link. I really should have one. And it's one that I try to keep like 10 hard copies of. Is a Stripe Press's Working in Public book, and I feel like that's a really great thing to check out, because it sums up what different project sizes are, how they operate, just kind of a lot more in general. I think that book really helped me. That came out after I had started my open source journey, but what I found is so many people are afraid to jump into open source because it is working in public. What if you make a mistake? Do I have to rewrite the Kubernetes scheduler to get any kind of acclaim or notoriety or figure out the space? And then we also get a whole bunch of questions around, where do I get started? which was that was my question as well. I'd started I was working in the healthcare space at the Cleveland Clinic. I had gone from VB6, Visual Basic 6 to .NET, C Sharp, PHP, kind of like bouncing around. I finally got to Ruby on Rails, and that was where I started to have my first open source moments, working on gems and Rails and database migrations, all those fun things. And we had then switched to Go. That's the time I discovered Docker and Kubernetes through meetups and all of our local community in Cleveland. And then that took me to all the way to Disney Studios, where I worked for about 4 years, then HashiCorp, then CNCF. And then it was in Disney that I discovered, Kubernetes, and it got we aligned on different teams adopting that at that point in time. We managed over like 450 applications, not including all the different environments and permutations there. So when every single team that we spoke to on the SRE side said, "Oh, we deploy things a little differently," we said, "Please, let's not. Let's develop a common language," and that was Kubernetes. So took a dive, met some of the SIG release, special interest group release folks, SIG docs. And then just my open source journey took off and brought me all the way to the CNCF, where I truly feel like I'm at home.
Awesome. One of the things that's always awesome is when usually in the opening keynote, there's, a question, hey, how many people is this your first KubeCon? And it's usually at least half the audience that's there new. So sometimes it's just a rotation of people inside a company, but there's always new companies. You know better than anyone, kind of the customer adoption. Can you give us a little bit, what's the expectation, size of the community, the size of the event here? Do you have some explanation as to why first week of November in Chicago, the Windy City? We had this similar discussion last year when it was like end of October in Detroit. So, shout out to the Midwest. It's good to go visit some different places, but it's not exactly the first time or place that most people would choose for a North American show.
I hear it's easy to stay warm with a deep dish slice of pizza, at least, or people putting that into their mittens or gloves. I've heard that may help. Not the most sanitary option, but I hear it'll work. That's what I had thought too. So I live in Los Angeles, and so my wardrobe doesn't include the same kind of coats and warm things that I normally carry with me in Cleveland. Looking forward to that. Really excited to. I just recently watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So for folks coming to Chicago, that gives a really good kind of like lay of the land and visualization as far as some of the things to expect. It might be a little outdated, but you might see a lot of similar landmarks on that front. Really stoked to hear a lot of conversations. And like you had said, I think platform engineering, AI, WebAssembly, so many things to talk about at KubeCon. And it's been, I submitted to talk to KubeCon. I didn't get accepted, but I'll be at the keynote. So I was happy about that one. The joke that I made when I was leaving HashiCorp and coming to the CNCF was that, I was like, sorry, everybody, I got to go. This is the only way I could get a talk accepted at KubeCon was to join the foundation. But not true. But that was a lot of fun. I was focusing, my talk was going to be focused on infrastructure as code, ironically enough, before all the news with OpenTofu and Terraform and everything on that front, and talking about where the right boundaries are that are most helpful for teams that are adopting things. Because you might not want to stand up Kubernetes end to end with everything with Terraform. It might make sense to have Argo or Flux or something else in the mix. So really just about creating those helpful boundaries.
So we teased it up and you just mentioned it again. So maybe if you could just lay out for people, what is this OpenTofu? How does it tie into kind of the open source and the foundations and your former employer?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I used to work at HashiCorp, and now I work at the CNCF. And so it's been, that's the fun thing with open source, is that if you have certain kind of things within infrastructure and SRE and all of these cloud native contexts pop up, you see a lot of the same people, you see a lot of similar conversations, and then you sometimes see tools do what they've done. So I think the last time that something similar to this happening was Node.js and IO.js. the fork of Node, and then it came back together at the end. And that's my candid hope is seeing something like that happen in the future. But so Terraform and many HashiCorp products specifically changed their license to the to BSL license, which is less permissive. It's not truly open source because it doesn't allow folks to what is it? It's if you are a competing product, you can't use that freely anymore, and so that goes against the Linux Foundation and the CNCF's view of what open source is. Some of the more permissive licenses that we accept and that we work with within the foundation are Apache 2. There are exceptions, like the Mozilla license MPL2. There's a couple things on that front, but they do need exceptions from our legal committees, and there's just a whole bunch of paperwork there. That's the fun thing that we get to do as a foundation.
To their credit, when Armand, talked about it publicly, he said, we're moving to BSL. We're no longer open source. So, pretty transparent, not trying to, wash and say, hey, yeah, we're doing this, but yeah, no, we're still open source. Nope. It's a new license. Here's what it is. But then they're right. Many in the community were a bit upset. They have forked it. It had a previous name. They just renamed it yesterday, Open Tofu, I guess. And because, Terraform's used like everywhere and by so many companies and things like that. There needed to be an open source alternative of that. So, yeah, and that's been accepted into the Linux Foundation?
Yeah, accepted into the Linux Foundation. I believe that they have an intent to apply to the CNCF. And that's open to any projects. If you want to come into the CNCF, you have a project, you want to donate it. You start with our technical oversight committee and opening up like a sandbox application. There's 3 levels of projects. There's sandbox, incubating, and graduated. Projects like Prometheus, Kubernetes, and a few other, and I think it's 18 right now, if I'm not mistaken. Projects that are graduated, there's more incubating, there's more sandbox projects. So that does still have to go through committee, and all that's done in the open. So a lot of people, I've had certain organizations and folks reach out to me saying, like, hey, what's happening? And the answer truthfully is, I know as much as you. Everything's going to happen in the open. So it's nice to have that kind of community feel. It's a less, we're not TMZ. So even though, I live in LA, that's not how things work in open source. It can feel like it sometimes, but not the case.
Yeah, it's the 3 levels really give a lot of stability to the projects as well, and security, because you do need, I think you need multiple different big companies with developers working on the projects. So it's not just like in Terraform's case where, 96% of the upstream contributions were coming from the employees. It's a little bit less stable because you are more at the will of the company that can, bring a business source license into play. Do you think that process is one of the strengths towards why the community continues to grow, because you continue to get buy-in from all these big companies for the projects?
Absolutely. I think it's bringing a conversation that I'm love hearing all of these different perspectives on is, what does the future of open source look like? How do certain organizations monetize things? Because and it's typical that folks will turn things into an us versus them narrative, which is not what we want, which is not what we want to see in the community at all, right? It takes money to run a business and to create all these things. It takes money for us to run as a foundation as well, and do security audits and handle legal challenges and host different training, certifications, other programs too. So I really like hearing about all of these different thoughts coming in from folks around our community about what makes sense, what doesn't. And I think the HashiCorp hasn't changed their licenses for any of those dependencies, which many CNCF projects depend upon. And so there isn't an impact there. And so you can kind of get lost in the license changed, but it was only a select few projects and repositories. So there's a whole bunch of digging on that front, and just so much to keep up.
Yes. So Taylor, this is the point where I wish I could say, and if you'd like to hear the full hour of, Mike Taylor and I digging into this, because we would totally, go to our website, but we got to bring it back to, Cloud Native Con, KubeCon discussion here. So, I was listening to an interview you did when you first took this job. And one of the things we all look at is the cloud native space oh my gosh, it is complex. It is changing all the time. I know I'm guilty of using memes of the CNCF landscape in person, like it was strings or things there, trying to figure out how you do it. We know what we do at Red Hat to help, curate, integrate, maintain, support, dozens and dozens of projects out there. But I'm sure you must hear from the end users all the time. And it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much and there's even more coming. And it's the paradox of choice and, help, what do we do? So what's your thoughts on that? What's the general conversation you're hearing from the practitioners and enterprises out there?
A lot of end users are asking for lots of help because they essentially have two jobs, and it's their full-time job, and then it's staying up to date on everything cloud native, like you'd mentioned. And one of the things that folks have mostly asked for help in that space is reference architectures and all, different types of assets, guides. Just please show me how to do the thing. And we haven't been able to provide that directly as a foundation because we are impartial. We don't pick the winners. We're not kingmakers. That's not part of our charter. We want to assist and help out, and that's why I'll see competing projects like used lovingly with Argo, Flux. You see some projects that might have some overlap or similar contexts, and that's completely okay. We believe that makes those projects stronger and gives them a little bit more to work off of when it comes to that focus. So we are spinning up. We just got the board approval on that, and we're actually into nominations right now for a new governmental or new governing body when it comes to the CNCF, and that's the End User Tab, which is a technical advisory board. That responsibility is going to be given to the tab to curate and work on things like recommended architectures, talking about operability and adaptability of these differing projects as they pertain to the CNCF, to end users, and then helping to bubble up a lot of their concerns as well. We have about 172 projects within the CNCF right now at different levels that we talked about before. And again, it's just dizzying when it comes to picking the right thing to use. What the end user tab is going to focus on is segmenting these things too. The way in which you use Kubernetes or Argo or any of these other projects might differ if you're in a manufacturing vertical versus a high trading kind of context or situation. And we want to be mindful of that too and help share the stories of people who have adopted things and publish those as those pieces of recommended architecture, not as a you have to do it this way, but more almost as an autobiography, right? You don't need to wake up at 5 a.m. and surf like the person in the book did, but if you want to, it's completely available to you.
Yeah, Mike, only 172. I think we need more storage, more security. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because
I was going to ask, because there's 18 or 19 graduated applications in the CNCF, are a lot of the reference architectures going to be based off of those, sort of because the community has bubbled these up to the surface as the most successful? I'm assuming it's pretty challenging to put a reference architecture and then pull something from the sandbox, for example, because there's a lot of hurdles to go through. So you're kind of pulling from 8 years of community growth in these applications into the graduated projects, and then now you can kind of say, hey, these are the 6 sort of core applications that you need if you're in manufacturing or something like that. And obviously, cloud native, swappable, replaceable for your needs, but we can be highly opinionated on it. Let's say, is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that honestly, I'm kind of curious to see, because it'll be the end user tab is going to be some folks. So you can check all the details out in our charter. We've gotten that updated on CNCF Foundation on GitHub, and that kind of talks about how that's the composition of what the end user tab will be. But we have some elections right now. I'm really curious to see what they end up deciding on. What are some of the first things that they take a look at? What are the projects that they focus on first? If that's my educated guess, is going to be graduated projects, but really curious to see if there's going to be one in incubating. They're like, oh, this is a pattern that a lot of people are using or really interested in, maybe around open telemetry or backstage. Taking a look at all of the data around what end users are contributing to versus what the greater whole at large are contributing to is also fascinating data. That's one area I have gotten ChatGPT's visualization plugin to help out with. So that's been fun for me.
Hey, Taylor, I remember there were a number of what were called the radars that the CNCF had done. When I was just taking a quick look, it doesn't look like anything's been done on those in the last year or so. Is that still an ongoing initiative, or is it? Yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks for asking on that one. That's been on my radar for a while, literally, figuratively, and actually, what's interesting about that is we've seen traffic. So the last one was published in September 2021, and the traffic to that site has it continued to increase many magnitudes since it's been published. So really, so that even though it's outdated, we see a lot of focus on that front. Which means more people want to take a look at things and they want to see if new radars are coming out. Good news that I have for you is yes, they are. In some of the later editions of the radar, we've gotten a lot of commentary and people asking for some changes, people wanting to see not just the tools themselves, but focus more on CNCF tooling specifically, as well as focus on some techniques and buzzwords and like, how do we frame this? Are we working on GitOps or infrastructure as code or zero trust security? Help me out with some of those terms so that I kind of understand what people are talking about when I hear these things on the hallway floors around KubeCons and other events within, or just even around the internet too.
Very cool. Taylor, I saw we were talking about reference architectures and bringing people on board. I want to go even further back to college interns, people that are trying to get started in the CNCF. There's a new zero to merge program, I believe, that I've seen pop up. Do you want to just detail that for us a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was one thing I was really excited about. Earlier this year, I know I'm making the Amazon folks mad by saying this, but I didn't. It wasn't a 6-pager; it was a 13-pager. As far as this program that we wanted to put together, because we kept getting that question all the time with, where do I get started? How do I meaningfully contribute to projects? Please just help me navigate this space. And we can have all of those one-off conversations, but we really wanted to figure out how to scale up those efforts and make this a useful thing for a lot of folks. So Zero to Merge focuses on people with programming experience and like some kind of understanding of the outline of what contributing to open source looks like, and helping them navigate different CNCF projects, learn the tools and techniques that it takes to actually go into that, how to write a useful issue, how to create a pull request. And we had set this goal of having 150 people apply. We were like, okay, let's just see how popular this might be. We ended up having over 870 people apply to the program. We were only able to take about 360 or so folks in for the first cohort. We're going to run another one in spring after KubeCon and everything else shakes out. But we had I was truly blown away and humbled by the amount of folks that joined, as well as seeing the efforts that they had contributed to. That I think we had somebody even in the first week, they just needed that friendly little nudge over the fence, and they got a pull request in. First week, we hadn't even covered that in terms of the course materials and everything else. So it's got to work with a whole bunch of people. We had consistent class sizes as well, so people were showing up. It wasn't like we had huge drop-offs or anything like that too. So just the motivation and seeing that continuation throughout that entire 4-week program was really, really fascinating to see. And it's my hope that, so many maintainers talk about burnout or feeling like they have everything in their world on their shoulders. We're looking to eliminate that too by creating this experience with a cohort of folks. We give folks the, oh, I worked with William or these other people that you can, Yash or many other people within our program. Now you have somebody you can go ping and ask, or like, hey, I'm having a real hard time understanding this, or I have a persistent practitioner who's pinging me about this thing. How do you navigate this? And they can rely on one another rather than just, have that personal inclination, ambition, and drive to go contribute to open source, become a maintainer, and then not really have a maintainer community around them. That's the way that we're trying to shift things on that front.
Yeah, it's always awesome that new ways to onboard people into the community. I remember a number of years ago, there was like a 101 track that was put into the agenda just because so many people, it's like we talked about, just overload. Oh my gosh, don't even know where to start. I don't want to be in the deep end when I come in there. Is there anything structurally from the show this year that is different that we should be looking for? How does Chicago look any same or different than, say, Detroit last year?
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that you'll notice is there are a lot more folks that will be at this KubeCon. We're seeing post-COVID, we just about everybody had that problem with attendance and virtual and kind of how do we navigate this new world. We are consistently seeing that folks want to be present in person. We're seeing a little bit of a decline in virtual attendees, still a lot, but we're seeing the in-person attendees start to really overpower that at this time. So I forget what we were targeting for KubeCon in Chicago. I want to say it's around like 9,000. But those events always sell out. Definitely go get your ticket if you're on the fence on that front. Worst case, you can always get a refund later, but they do sell out. So you go and run. That's not me being biased or with my CNCF hat on. That's just some fun logistics. So you'll see tons of people there. Again, I'm really excited to hear about how people are thinking about things like AI, LLMs, platform engineering, all of these different topics, because even digging more deeply into some of the AI things too. Like I've seen some organizations outright just say like, we're not using this at all. It's banned. And that's not our stance at the CNCF and at the LF. We want people to be able to meaningfully use things. What we're seeing a lot of talk about is about privacy and data classification, and that being the thing. What's okay to give to the model, even if it isn't, even if we have that promise that it won't be reused or trained upon. How do we mitigate all of the things like ChatGPT, for instance? You can share out a link and kind of have like a collaborative ChatGPT session. That would be really scary if you're plugging in, corporate data and just like trade secrets and things of that nature. A bad idea in general would be putting in social security numbers. How do you navigate those spaces? And that's where a lot of really interesting conversations start to happen around that space. And then as well as how do we meaningfully use this? Yes, I know we can summarize a web page. That's cool. But how do we bring that a little bit more deeper? How can we actually utilize this to increase our performance and how we navigate our work in all of those respective spaces?
Yeah, Mike, sounds like a lot of the things you're dealing with all the time, even before the LLMs and the like came out.
Oh yeah, and then seeing security sort of it's been maturing. I feel like when I look at all of the sessions, it's pretty much mature in Kubernetes. A lot of diversity in the talks from a security standpoint. One of the interesting overlaps was it's a lot of zero trust, a lot of data sovereignty conversations, and I think that paired with the incubation of Kubeflow, for example, I think you're going to start to see some overlap into the AI and security space for talks in the coming year. So I think that's a cool and interesting trend. Another thing I want to call out: Tim Hawken has a talk, Kubernetes over the next 10 years. Is it technically too early, or is it pretty much 10 years since Kubernetes was started? 2013, 2014?
Yeah,
Right?
I think we're gearing up. There are conversations happening about what we're going to be doing for Kubernetes' 10th birthday. We're going to be celebrating that in Paris. So lots of again, still working on some things. I get ready to blow out the candles, make some wishes, and scale your cluster for sure.
So it's a little too early to ask you about your thoughts on Kubernetes in the next 10 years. We're going to have you back on next year for that discussion.
Exactly. Well, I guess you could have it like the first year it came out, and then what are the next 10 going to look like? That's always a valid conversation, I guess. But so that nobody will actually is me.
Crazy. I remember I interviewed Tim and Joe and a couple others when we had the 5-year birthday for it. So I expect in Paris it's going to be a really big croissant that we're all going to have to cut through and everything. So. Hey, Taylor, you've shared a lot of things there. Anything particular that you personally are excited about? Or there, we talk about all the learnings and everything. What about kind of peer-to-peer learnings? How do the end users, something I'm really passionate about, something Red Hat's really passionate about. So what are you expecting at the show? What are some things that you're looking forward to? And I expect it's going to have some tie-in with users being able to learn from their peers.
That's the other great thing about the role is that it's not it's not about having the right answer. It's knowing how to connect people that do have the right answer, or those places in which you can actually learn what those answers are, or truly just have a discussion. That's the best way that we can work together. So I love this role because it allows me that opportunity to meet so many people, and then to be able to plug them into each other, and so that they can have the discussions. If I'm lucky enough, I get to listen along and ask some questions of my own. But in many cases, it is just saying like, "Oh, hey, you're working on this thing. Let's connect you with this person over here. They're having the same problem," and they'd be like, "Wait, what? We're in completely different industries." And I'd be like, "Yeah, no, go talk with them." And that's what I'm looking forward to mostly at Kubecon, honestly, is just seeing everybody there. There is this wild magic that happens when people are gathered together, and they just, the ideas that are generated out of being able to see each other in person, and these people that you normally just wouldn't bump into. It really can't be done over Zoom, for whatever it's worth. That magic just doesn't happen there. And
Yeah,
so that's why
Taylor,
you
it's what
asked.
we always talk about. It's the hallway track is the one that
My
fill up your
favorite.
card with as much of that as possible, because a lot of the sessions are going to be recorded. You can watch them and do that and everything. But the hallway track, Mike, I know you're excited to go again. So give us what are you looking forward to? Any key themes? Any key things you're looking to dig into?
I mean, we already talked about it. I'm looking for security around AI ML, specifically, zero trust. Want to see what's going on in the Cube flow and backstage, because when I started with Kubernetes, I was doing data science and helping scientists get set up in containers, and that's a huge advantage for them. And so I'm looking to see how that message continues to move on, and we can get more and more people working in Kubernetes directly, especially for those workloads. And just in general, I kind of curious to see what the prediction is over the next 10 years. I feel like from a security and Kubernetes space, things have matured to the point where adoption is pretty much booming, especially in the big corporations. So it's, starting to see those use cases, reference architectures get tweezed out. I think the more and more that happens, the more you're going to get more bigger onboarding at bigger companies. So just the use cases, and I think obviously the security around ML and AI workloads.
Well, it's funny. I remember when we had the 5-year birthday, one of the things we talked about is by the time we get to this point, we shouldn't be calling it KubeCon as much. We should be calling it Cloud Native Con so much. So when you just went through a whole bunch of things there, it's not the Kubernetes, it's everything around it and all of the other pieces. It's this ecosystem. It's what we deliver from it, the value that businesses get from it. I do have to give a plug for one of the day zero events that we've got going on. I know Mike will be there. OpenShift Commons is geared at, practitioners sharing their stories, how they're contributing to open source, what they're learning from their peers. So there's a phenomenal lineup of day zero events always at the show. It's been interesting. Some of them have kind of pulled out of the show to separate events, like the Cloud Native Security Show, which I know you were both at this year, and will be, June next year? I think we're doing the next one. But so many. There's Edge Day and ArgoCon, but OpenShift Commons is a free one to attend. We'll pop up the link in the chat here to be able to do it. We don't have the users listed there, but just keep an eye on it ahead of time. You'll see the long list of practitioners. I've already seen kind of the draft list of what's up there, and I'm really excited to hear those stories that they've got, as well as, of course, from a Red Hat standpoint, if you walk into the show floor, we're one of the first booths you see. We'll have a big presence there and a lot of things going on. Wow, Taylor, what have we missed? Give us, there's always some of the nuggets that, we'll talk to some of the people and be like, hey, what are those hidden gems that, you're excited for? Always there's certain speakers, you mentioned Tim Hawken. If Kelsey Hightower ends up giving a presentation, he'll of course draw a crowd and the like. But yeah, what do you've got for us for other kind of nuggets, and not quite as prominent as like a backstage or WASM or some of these things that have been getting a lot of buzz?
I think that I'm really curious to see. So what is it? I want to say maybe a year and a half ago, about the time I started, I started hearing folks about folks that had gone to DevStats and looking at like LFX and these other platforms that we have to be able to visualize contributions to projects. And you saw Kubernetes starting to hit a little bit of a plateau and level off a little bit, which really concerned some folks. So like, oh no, Kubernetes contributions are going down. What's happening? And that's actually a good thing. And so it's because it's starting to stabilize. People are starting to add less features into core Kubernetes, and they're starting to create new projects or divert their focus to, okay, Kubernetes is as solid as I need or want it to be. There's always going to be work that needs to be done, right? It's the same as Linux, but it's just not as spotlight focused. And so in general, it's not a huge golden nugget, but just something I want to put, challenge everybody to look and do is kind of see what's happening within the industry. We're starting to see a lot of people focus on Backstage, Argo, OpenTelemetry. We've solved all of the common language that we need to spin up and work with different applications. But now we're seeing other areas of focus pop into our peripheral. And so are we focusing on observability? Are we focusing on deliverability and app sustainability? What are the next kinds of things that we're actually going to focus on? I think, AI, WebAssembly, Edge, all of those things are quick and easy buzzwords, but I do think that there is something a little bit more deeply foundational going on where we're starting to rethink these things. And it kind of echoes what Kelsey Hightower has said in the past around he sees Kubernetes as fading into the background over time. And I think that we'll start to see more and more of that. It'll be less of a focus, and we'll start to see more, how are we thinking about applications or storage or all of those sub things as well. So I'm kind of curious to see what things emerge out of this KubeCon as far as what people talk about and what that area of focus is. But I'll be focused on some of the key ones there as well, but definitely be hitting up the hallway track and having conversations with folks about what they see is coming up next, and just hearing from businesses and organizations directly about some of the challenges that they face too. We tend to have that picture of how the world works from a technology standpoint, but when it goes into that adoption or operability kinds of concerns, things can be wildly different.
Mhm. I think the event-driven autoscaler, the project, I think it graduated, but I think that's a perfect example of something that doesn't need to be in Kubernetes. I know it's been asked for a long time, but it doesn't need to be in the core Kubernetes application. And so it just gets pulled off. It's a separate project. If you need something like that, you can go and use it, right? That's an example of what you're looking for. I think that was the point, right? Is you get all that feature and functionality now pulled into the separate projects, and now we can create all our reference architectures from that as part of the new CNCF initiative, right?
And it makes Kubernetes itself a lot more maintainable too, right? It's like having that giant repository of everything, and that's I know some will disagree with me, but that splitting into microservice type of focus really does help in a governance stance and just an overall focus, right? Because if you have to focus on the entirety of the project, get all those things to line up, and then to lead a release. That's a lot of work, and it can be just very painful to connect all of those gears together. Not just CI/CD or tooling or devs or RPMs, but just even connecting people. So that's really where it helps. And then it creates all of those projects have their own release schedules, conversations of their own, et cetera, and they can just go more deeper.
I did have one fun question. Any tips and tricks for the event itself? Good shoes, water bottle. You've been to a bunch of these. For anybody that's new, what are your recommendations?
Yes. So, I worked I worked at a place. You can just check out LinkedIn and put on your bingo guess. But worked at a place, and they when I went to shows, they actually had a closet that you could open up. They had 5-hour energies. They had liquid IVs. They had Advil. They had all hand sanitizer. They had just this whole palette of stuff. And so that's typically when I'm looking in my bag, that's what I recommend doing, is just, making sure to treat yourself, especially if you're jumping across different time zones. Even if it is 1, 2, 3 hours, it can be just enough to throw you off balance. And so that's my favorite one, is just like hydrate. Absolutely. I'm always packing liquid IVs, different elevations and things like that can really affect you. Start with yourself. Make sure that you're good. You've got enough sleep or have caffeine. You're hydrated. When you're hitting the show floor, though, I would say, again, make it a point to hit up the hallway track. There will be talks. They will be recorded. They will be on YouTube. If you want to support someone or you have a coworker speaking, by all means, go and check out their talk. Don't tell them like, hey, it's on YouTube, I'll see you later. They might not like that one. But if you're really focusing on figuring out how to break into the community, or you're just trying to uncover or figure out a certain space or aspect like WebAssembly AI, or just take a look at some different companies and how they do things, hit up the hallway track. If you just go to the project pavilion and everything to ask questions, people are wildly open and happy to answer your questions within reason. Answer to life, they'll probably tell you 42. But when it comes to Argo and other things, those are some great places to ask folks questions and get a little bit more clarity too. I'm trying to think if like any other fun little secrets. It's been a couple years since I've been in Chicago, so I don't have any tips on that front, but definitely recommend planning your escape routes as far as getting back to your hotel room and then navigating the party that we'll have on, I think it's Wednesday night. That's the other thing that we've done too, is shift the conference days a little bit. So I believe the main keynotes are going to be happening on a Tuesday now rather than a Wednesday. So that's also something to make note of, in addition to time zones if you're switching those as well.
Yeah, definitely. I understand. There's not so many hotels near the actual event, so a lot of people, you'll be taking the buses from one of the loops to there. So just plan accordingly. Remember, you'll get there. Take a deep breath. It's like sitting in traffic. Just it'll be fine. But yeah, really, Taylor, really good tips there. We actually have Red Hat's conference next year is going to be in Denver, so the time change and the elevation, definitely something we need to make sure to take advantage of, because I know I personally, when I go to events, like, I get less sleep and I don't sleep as well in a hotel. So long days and things like that, you do want to take care of yourself. Awesome. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us. I want to say, you talk to lots of customers. Always love to have a user if they want to talk about what they're doing in the open source space, what they're doing with cloud. Love them on as guests, on the program here, and always looking for interesting topics. So want to wish you and the team, best of luck in Chicago. Definitely for those of you watching, if you go in person, you can track down Mike. He'll be at the OpenShift Commons, as well as, around the Red Hat booth and lots of other activities. We've got, we're one of the top sponsors of the event, so we sent a good team there. Lots of things going. Look, we'll have an event page up soon for Red Hat's full sessions. I think we've got over 30 speakers at the show. So definitely they'll be on YouTube, but you'll want to see some of them in person, especially if you want to ask questions, is usually the thing that I love, tracking down some of the speakers and like have a follow-up or connect them and everything. So Taylor, I want to give you the last word. Open Tofu, you've got some good puns as to why that's a good name for that project, that the open source version of what was Terraform.
Absolutely. So yeah, to me, it's infrastructure as code cubed. It pairs well with Spice, even some community hot takes. And I was trying to come up with one for Tempa, but it's been a little bit temperamental for me. So.
Yeah, well, you're warming up now. On Awesome. Well, Taylor, hey, thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank everybody else. As I said, I will not be at KubeCon Chicago, but I will actually be at another very large container-related show. That's AWS reInvent. You, me, and 75,000 of our friends, many of which will care about containers and Kubernetes, the week after Thanksgiving, in everybody's favorite place to go to conferences, Las Vegas. Thank you for joining. We'll be back. I've got next show is in about a month. We've got an update actually coming from OpenShift, which has we'll be talking a lot more about cloud in that session. So as always, feel free to reach out if you have ideas on guests, ideas on topics, or anything we talked about. And as always, thank you for joining us on your journey in the clouds.